I knew nothing about Raam Doss. I know he was a friend of Wayne Dyer's, which is how he came to light, but many of you said, oh, please do pictures for him. Turns out his real name was Richard Alpert, and he was the guy who was a professor at Harvard University with Timothy Leary, and together they explored how psychedelic drugs affect the human mind and human performance and so on. I guess by just trying them. by just consuming them. Anyway, he did that. He had to leave, I think, Harvard University because of that. He went off to India, where he pursued Eastern philosophies and learned all about various gurus and yoga and so on. And in 1971, he wrote a book called Be Here Now, which is considered a seminal work. I have heard of that, by the way. Which is considered a seminal work on how to live in the moment. How to be spiritually whole. What's fascinating about that is that in 1997 he had a stroke. Now you'd think, well, anybody can have a stroke. But as soon as I read that, it put up a red flag in my mind. And so I went to look up strokes in Messages from the Body, that book I've mentioned several times, which tells you the psychological reasons for physical ailments. An amazing, amazing book. And what it said about strokes was this, that when you suffer a stroke, it's because you are a servaholic. They tend to become engaged in compulsive and codependent compassion, and to become involved in taking on the problems of the world in an unsung hero pattern. They then get burned out and resentfully burned up about the lack of recognition and support in their lives. They feel overwhelmed and feel like giving up. After Raam Doss had a stroke, he was okay for a while. He gave lectures, he did a lot of stuff, wrote more books. Then he ended up getting so ill that he had to basically retire to Maui, and that's where he stayed until he died in 2019 at the age of 88. But that idea of giving too much, of serving too much, but not getting recognition in return, not getting the validation you need, really played into the pictures I saw when I went into his energy. When I found him, he was entangled in a bunch of wires. Didn't matter how he twisted, couldn't get out of them. He contorted this way, dragged himself around. Nothing released them. Because what it took to release yourself from this harness of constraint was to stop thinking about the harness of constraint. To let go of all these ideas. And this is very prevalent now in the transition pictures, whereby people who've subscribed to a particular meta-narrative, a belief system, a tribal script, those people go into the death process with those ideas still fixed in their head. And they so frequently don't bear any resemblance to what the reality is. So expectations and reality are completely different. And even if the policy is just be here now, just live in the moment, don't think, don't overthink, don't get attached, all these kind of things that he believed in, those are still rules and principles and ideas that you're attached to. Right? And so only when he was prepared to start again and go, okay, all right, that's what I believed when I was a mortal. Now I'm back in immortality. I'm prepared to let that go and see what comes. At which point, these strings, these wires, released him and he dropped to the ground. And in fact, he quite enjoyed the physical freedom. I think probably because he'd been so ill for so long, That this idea that he wasn't ill anymore, that his body, which wasn't really even a body, but that his body was now fine, that he felt light and free, that really captivated him. And he was utterly fascinated by what was around him, what things were made of, why he was here in this, what is obviously a metaphorical tunnel, but it represents how he reacted to this process. It's like, wow, look at that, that's amazing. Who can believe that's happening? Look at this. It was like constant wonder. He had wonder and he was enthralled. It was kind of magical. And he thought, okay, well, take me then. And he jumps up, imagining that unconditional love or whatever will support him and take him. But in fact, he falls back down again. Oh, I guess I'm going to have to walk. But look how great this is. And he dawdled. And he was just so caught up in being here now. So much so that the unseen forces that inhabit these metaphorical tunnels thought, this guy needs to get a move on. And I felt them sweep down this tunnel. You know that feeling you get when you get a warm draft under a door? You put your hand there and you can feel the warm draft under the door. It was like that. It didn't take him as a person. It just sort of wrapped around his ankles and lifted him up. But then he turned upside down. The forces kind of just held him by his ankles and pulled him. Because otherwise he would have stayed in the moment at a molecular level. It's like, oh my God, look at that. Oh, imagine this. Wow, I can't believe this. And so on. So the unseen forces, grace, unconditional love, pulls him up the tunnel. It was the only way he could be stopped from slipping back into his preconceptions and protocols and rules and whatever else he'd brought with him from the mortal into the eternal. It's the only way they could do that. And once he was at the top of the tunnel, he was laid down on the floor and left there. And even then, he was picking at the ground. He was engrossed in every molecule that he was staring at. Oh, this is amazing. And as he looked at the dome that I always see at this particular point, this body of light ahead of him, he was now fascinated by that too. He stood up, he looked at that. Wow, what is this? He wanted to press his face against it like a Victorian urchin against the shop window. Wow, what's in there? It was peculiarly intense for somebody who was supposed to be so in tune with consciousness and life and so on. But what he realized in that moment was that in the phrase "be here now," the here doesn't actually matter. Just be now. Be now. Don't worry about the future. Don't think about the past. Don't concern yourself with where you are or the state of your finances or whether you're ill or whether. Just be now. And he had this realization as he tried to process all this data and this knowledge and information that was coming at him from every side. He had this realization that the here was unnecessary. That all you had to do was be. So that when it came to touching the dome, as he was looking into it going, what is this? Where are we going? What's next? His arm slipped into it. Up to his shoulder almost. And he goes, that's it. It's that easy. I didn't have to make that kind of laborious effort. It just happens. And he slid in. It's like, whoa, oh my God. and was gone. It was so simple. Mayor Barber, who I think was one of Wayne Dyer's heroes, said, each soul is God passing through the imagination in order to realize its own divinity. We are here so that God, infinite intelligence or whatever, can experience itself and its own creation. That's why you, and I, but you are important. That's why you're here. You have a job to do. Every emotion you have, every experience you have, everything that happens to you in life, whether it's simple or complicated, is your way of doing God's work. The work of the universe, of the cosmos. You are here learning and growing so that the universe can learn about itself. That's the reason you're here. But in order to do that, you simply have to be. Be now. Wherever you are. Not just here, but wherever you are. Be now. And that's, I think, what Raam Doss learned during his transition. There was one extra piece missing from his jigsaw. And he found that in his transition before he passed. That it was all so much easier than he thought or expected or had been taught. That's what I took away from that. Alrighty, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Subscribe, like, share. Follow me on Twitter, if you like, @CashPeters. Otherwise, I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.